I'm very excited to be here with you today. There are lots of reasons why I wanted to be here. Two of the key reasons are on this stage right now. Both came to their place here at different stages in their lives, but both with unbelievable impact. And honestly, both young. You were how old? 10 when you first started as an activist, delivering your first speech? 10. And you were 17 years old. Have you guys got your mics with you? Grab your mics here too. Yep. There you go.
Okay.
10 and 17. Just what does it mean to be an upstander to you? What does that mean to you when you think about that?
You want to go?
For me, when I think of upstander, I think about those moments in our lives where we see injustice or see things that just don't feel right in our hearts, things that are not fair. And you all know that feeling of when you make a fist of frustration and you say in your head, somebody should do something. Being an upstander is the moment when I realize, I'm the somebody.
I have to do it. For you, probably a similar experience in a way.
Definitely a similar experience. One of those where you notice, okay, this is definitely not right, and it should have been fixed so long ago.
Can you walk people through what it is you did?
Sure. So in 2013, our high school prom at the time was still segregated. We had a black prom and we had a white prom. In
2013.
In 2013, yeah. Down in South Georgia in the U.S., like the Bible Belt states or whatnot. And my classmates and I, we did everything else together our entire lives. Like, we're in locker rooms together because we're playing basketball and we're cheerleaders or football players. We're going to each other's houses to study. We had our senior camp out at one of our other classmates' house, and everybody's like in the house and in the yard and whatnot. Pretty much anything that you could think of, we all did together. But the only thing that we didn't was we didn't go to prom together. We had those separately. And so I just figured, you know, I'm glad everything worked out for the classes behind us, but let's not do that. Let's make a change and do something different because it made no sense. Like, we're past segregation, we're past Jim Crow, so why would we still be doing this?
But you would think that that would be logical for everybody, but we know that it's not.
Obviously not.
And even in your own
Not at all.
teachers. So you got lots of support around the world, but you also did not get that support right.
Yeah, so it was definitely a mix because I had a teacher who tried to fail me, and I'd gotten A's my entire school career. Like, I didn't know what it felt like to have a D.
Let me tell you, a D was something that we could only aspire to. Right? But okay, so you were a straight A student.
Yeah, I was a straight A student, and so to be in the middle of like my graduating year, graduated 4.0 GPA, and to have a teacher who's like, so yeah, no, we're going to take your GPA down now because you guys are doing something that we don't agree with. I understand you have your own personal beliefs, but let's not attack my wonderful academic record as a result.
Yeah. You can see her prom dress upstairs. Yep, it's in this museum.
It's there.
What was it like to see it here?
It was just as surreal as it was the first time because honestly, as much of an impact as it's made, it's never really been about me. For me, it's more so about the impact itself and other people getting to shine their own light as a result of me and my friends deciding to shine ours. Yeah. And noticing that, okay, yes, one person can make a difference. One voice matters. And you can change. It's like throwing a rock into a pond. You can just toss one and there are ripples that just continue. And one thing leads to another. It's domino effect.
And you see this too in all the work that you do. And you've been doing it for a long time now. And you rep this city really hard, and you rep the north of this city really hard, right?
North End, baby.
Yeah. As a North End Winnipeg guy, can you talk a little bit about your journey through this and when you realized that it's not just that, oh, damn, I'm going to be that someone, but the being that someone actually has impact? When did you get a sense that that was really happening?
Well, I think for myself, I was really fortunate in Winnipeg to be surrounded by so many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit leaders that were teaching me the value of kinship and talking about how important it is for us to treat one another as if we are relatives, and emphasizing things like reciprocity. So if you're going to give something to me, I hope you make space in your life so that I can give something back to you as well. And so I think really in Winnipeg here, I have been raised up by so many Indigenous leaders, and as somebody who comes from the child welfare system myself and didn't get to grow up in my home reserve of Shamattawa, which is struggling right now with water, with mental health crises, my relatives are struggling. Their human rights are in flux. My work in the north end of Winnipeg is to do whatever I can to amplify not only the perspectives of those of us living in poverty, people who are trying to fight systems that are separating families, but also to amplify and strengthen the connections and relationships that I have with my relatives in isolated rural and remote communities, because when they're hurting, so am I.
If we're real talking here, this country has done an amazing job of telling a story about how impactful we have been around the world, knowing full well of the neglect here for communities. So when you would hear those stories being told or presented, how did you feel about this country and where we are?
Well, we talk often about truth and reconciliation in Canada. And the whole idea with truth is that we got to be real about what's happening here. And what's real about what's happening in this country today is that systems of family separation persist. We have recommendations, I added them up, from the Aboriginal Justice Inquiry that Murray Sinclair was a part of in 1990, all the way to the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girl Two-Spirit Inquiry that happened, and those recommendations got released just 5 years ago. We have had over 1,061 recommendations, calls to action, or calls for justice from Indigenous people that have time and time again said, these are the harms that our communities and families have experienced, and here are the ways that we can get out of it. How many more recommendations, calls to action, or calls for justice is it going to take for Indigenous people, or just people in Canada, to be treated as humans so they have access to basic things like water, basic things like their family, and we have opportunities to feel and give love in our lives? And so to me, that's what we got to work towards, because we're not having enough of those conversations around truth.
How are you both? How are you both growing in this role and this position? I think you and I are probably both surprised we're here. Right? And I know 10 years ago, you wouldn't have imagined you would be inside this building, right?
No, not at all. Many Indigenous people were just on the other side of the street protesting when this came in. I remember there was a group of grandmothers that were praying and wanted to come in and share medicine and smudge the building, and they were refused. Mm-hmm. And you don't disrespect our grandmas in our community, because when you do, you disrespect all of us. Mm-hmm. And so it was really important for the entire community to rally around our grandmas and at that time and speak to the museum. And I remember being sent to focus groups from those grandmas to be able to amplify the perspectives of Indigenous people, to make sure that those requests that they had to be treated as a relative could be respected by this museum. And 10 years ago, we are in a very different place today than we were 10 years ago, and I have seen so many Indigenous moments happen in and around this museum, and relationships being built. And I know we have a lot more work that we got to do on reconciliation, but I am proud of the museum for the progress that we have made, because yes, we got a long way to go, but we have come a long way, and we've done that together. So thank you all for the pushing that you have done. But I want you all to know we're only part way there. And so we have to continue this work. I know the witness blanket just came here to the museum,
Yeah.
and so we got to keep pushing. Our work is not finished.
In the United States, Canadians are obviously very connected to what happens in the United States in very practical ways and also in mythological ways. You know, the election takes up a lot of oxygen. We hear an awful lot about race and where we are today. Things are better, but then you think, maybe are they? What's your experience with this, your role in this now, and how it's changing in your country?
So I would say the dynamic in the United States has changed in ways that are definitely positive, but also it's changed and stayed the same. As crazy as it sounds, it's an absolute oxymoron, but the racism that exists now is simply just a lot more covert than it once was. So it didn't really go anywhere. There are things that still occur in the United States that most people would not believe. For example, you would think that lynchings no longer happen, but they do. Nobody just knows about them. It doesn't get talked about on the news. My brother has literally been in West Kentucky and feared for his life because he's driving a car away from a lynch mob in Western Kentucky. A couple years ago. Yeah. My little sister was in high school, who she graduated in 2020, was chased out of a house with her friends and had to run through a cotton field because there's someone with somebody's parent with a shotgun trying to kill them. The things that you think are no longer happening are still happening. It's just that you don't get to see it. Yeah. And so, of course, with, different political things that occur and Black Lives Matter movement, things are beginning to be better to some degree, because you do have those individuals who are very adamant about making sure that change continues to occur and people are being able to be aware of what's happening. But it's still not where it should be. It's still not enough, and we have to make sure that we're having these uncomfortable conversations in order for progress to continue moving forward.
We're grateful to be able to have it with you here tonight and talk. I love the fact that it's not of human rights, rather for human rights, and that it is an act that requires action all the time to maintain it. We hear an awful lot about the generational divides. Every era has had that. If you look at it from your perspective, so I remember when I was doing the Old Talk Show on CBC, and we covered Idle No More quite a bit. And we felt that Idle No More was a change, something different was happening. And I feel like in Canada, you're seeing a lot of that. Was that your experience as well?
That was my experience, and Idle No More, and that was for those of us that were back around in 2012.
Before the prom was integrated.
That was just the year before.
Before that, yeah.
Yeah, the year before. So what ended up happening was, I remember Idle No More was happening, and what ended up happening was, it was one of the first political moments where I saw Indigenous young people taking political leadership and calling to attention the realities that we were experiencing as Indigenous young people. But my favorite thing about Idle No More is that it wasn't new. It was a continuation of the work that our relatives and our grandmas and grandpas have been doing for so many generations. And maybe we call it Idle No More today, but we all saw it as young leaders as the continuation of the work of those that have came before us. And my dream, as I think about Idle No More, is I think about what comes next. And in Winnipeg, we talked a lot about the village. And we talk about how we're building the village, and we treat each other in the village as if we are relatives, and we regard one another as family, and we feed one another, and we laugh with one another, and we hold each other to account when we make mistakes, and we walk with them to be able to be a little bit better. And so those experiences have been so foundational for me, but I recognize now that Idle No More moved me into a position of leadership, and it is now my responsibility to do as much as I can to create space, opportunity for other young leaders to come next, and they can move into these positions of leadership and influence because their voices are stronger, their voices are more forceful, and I have so much faith in the upcoming generation that they're going to push much harder even than we did.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Without question. They're a lot more. They don't really have any apprehension. No filter. Yeah, that's probably a great way to say it. Like,
Do they make you two feel old now when you're listening to them?
oh God, I don't know how to keep up with the new stuff. I'm not hip.
You're only 30.
I know.
You're only 30. What do you mean?
And I know, but the new ones, like they're always like we're asking you for advice because you're so much older than us, And I realized I'm like, oh, they'll never know what a VCR is or a payphone.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh goodness, because I remember when gas was like $1 and something. They'll never know.
And I think, when we hear a lot about cynicism of generations. I think cynicism and feeling helpless is a little bit of a privileged position. Both your communities don't have the luxury of getting to be cynical in that way because things have to obviously change. For you, this was kind of your first moment, you had said to me, when you put this together, but it's kind of not if you look at your family history.
Oh yeah, no.
Right?
By way of family history, it definitely wouldn't be the first. So my grandmother is absolutely amazing. My mom's mother. Back in 94, 95, she was actually the first Black elected school board member in Wilcox County, the same county that I had the prom in. But she came against insane levels of opposition also. Like, they burned crosses in her front yard. In the 90s.
In the 90s, yeah.
Like, we're talking about mid-90s. And there was a pump house that was in the backyard because we have well water. And they burned down the pump house hoping that the fire would catch to the actual house. But luckily, my grandmother is a light sleeper. She doesn't sleep with light. And so they saw the light coming through her bathroom window from the fire. And that was the only way that they knew to, like, call the fire department. There was even a guy who's an elected official that said, oh, we should tie a brick around your neck and throw you in the Upmuggy River. So
what did your grandmother and your mom, what they think when you decided to have your moment here?
Oh, my grandmother was ecstatic because she's a firecracker, She's like, okay, great. So we're going to do it. You're always wonderful things. My mom was very supportive also. She was just making sure that I knew what it was that I was getting into because of the fact that our town and community does have the dynamic that it has. And so for her, it was just making sure I was aware of the fact that this process is not going to be easy and you may lose some friends, which I did. And people might not see you the same way that they do now. And as long as you're prepared for what's going to happen as a result, then you're okay.
In walking through the Canadian part of this museum where you can see the different modules and the different places where all this really varied history and struggles in this country alone, one of the reasons I like this building so much, first of all, the architecture is out of this world. And the fact that when you walk, as it was described to me today, you can see people who are later in the journey in this museum and earlier in the journey in this museum. So they may not know what you yet know, and the person ahead of you knows what you don't know yet, and you can see each other's journey. I think is the intentionality is so incredible. But the other thing I like is that when people come around the world, they can recognize their struggles in other people's struggles around the world. Can you just walk us through that a little bit, what that must feel like?
Well, I have this intrinsic belief that indigenous knowledge will save the world. And the reason I have that belief is because somewhere deep inside all of us, in our family roots, we all have a relationship and a connection to the land and to the earth. And so indigenous knowledge asks us and calls for us to treat one another as relatives, but also asks us to treat the earth as a relative too. And so I think that if we can all get in touch with that, in my language, in Swampy Cree, we say Wakotowin. Everyone repeat after me, say Wakotowin. See, congratulations, you're speaking Cree now. And so Wakotowin is kinship, and it means it's not just about people, it's about the way we regard the world. And so I really think that those principles of kinship are universal, and people from around the world, when they come here and they see the drum that's on the wall right there, and when they see other elements of Indigenous identity and story and circles and overcoming struggle, they're gonna connect that to their own journeys and their own families as well. And it makes me really proud of my relatives that have gone before me, and it makes me want to be one of those good ancestors for all the kids that are coming next.
Finding a home in Winnipeg, I imagine that was not on your vision board when you were 12. So, like, you just wouldn't have known that you would have found a real welcome here.
Yeah, I never would have imagined to be sitting in this room right now. Like, there's no way. If you told me this, I would be like, yeah, you're crazy. might need to medicate you. But but no, so the welcome that I found here, and like a home away from home, has been absolutely wonderful, because you don't often get to be in rooms like this and look like me and have people who genuinely want you to be there and are happy to be a part of whatever it is that is going on in and of that moment. And so to be here in Winnipeg, and 10 years later, since the museum was built, being the first time that I came, it's really surreal all over again, and I love it so much. Thank you.
I could sit up here for hours and talk to both of you, but we're out of time. So thank you so much for sharing your story, and thank you for letting us be a part of your evening today, and for the incredible work that you're doing, even just by being here. Thank you.